have with us today Nathan Gianneschi, and he comes all the way from Evanston. And we're going to explore a little bit about Nathan, and most of the things should be the questions I ask with regard to science. Okay?
Sure.
So, what individual or individuals most influenced your scientific thought?
Yeah, is a range of people. So I got very interested in going to research based on my undergraduate research advisor first. So he's actually an inorganic chemist. So he studies and still studied then and still does coordination chemistry, in particular of metals like platinum. And I got interested initially in inorganic chemistry, so the way metals behave in enzymes, for example. And these guys were studying, fundamental processes by which metals coordinate with organic molecules. And I thought, well, I'll start there. But what I really wanted to do that whole time was study the biological interface of those materials, of that kind of chemistry. So that was the first point when I thought, well, I'm not going to go to med school. My parents were a little bit disappointed by it. They said, well, now you're never going to make any money. You're going to go into academia, which may be true. But that was the first sort of thing that led me away from and towards sort of this sort of creative pursuit of scientific research, really totally focused on that. And with him as an undergrad, and this is 19 years old or something, he said, well, you got to go to the States if you want to be a professor and do this job with more freedom, because of funding and everything else. And so I started looking at labs where that kind of thing was being done, where there's really completely synthetic approaches to interfacing with biology, that kind of interface. And that's kind of what we do now, and I've always been attracted to that. But it really started then when I was, 19 or 20 years old with people saying, yeah, let's do something really creative, I think was the key thing. And that was Lou Rendina, who's my undergrad advisor, actually at the time. And there have been many other people since then. But that was what set me, I think, on the path of selecting that kind of mentor from then on, right?
Keeping along that line of thought, those, unless restricted to science, those scientific individuals that you admire the most, what common qualities do they share?
Yeah, there's a few people that come to mind. I think it's a combination of things. I think the people who there's a sort of an admiration to do with the way the science is done, or the way that it's conveyed to people. So the ability to actually to do really robust science, but then convey it in some way that people of all kinds can understand. And I think that way the sort of the basic idea gets across in a better way. So the communicators, and the requirement that is part of the process has been really interesting. I think a lot of graduate students are a little bit surprised by that. Some of the most successful scientists are the ones who are the best at actually communicating what they've done. And I think commonly people think, oh, scientists, you must be just in a lab, jammed in a lab, but actually most scientists are much more outgoing than that. So I've kind of been attracted to those folks, and when you said that, I thought of a few specific people who are just famously good communicators of what they do. But actually what they're doing is very, very basic research. If you read their papers, they're well written, but they are absolutely straight basic science. And I think I think that's what's probably been the thing that have wanted to emulate the most. Whether or not I achieve that or not, I guess we'll see.
I think you're right. Yeah, we are in many respects salesmen, and if we can't sell.
Yeah, and I think as well the people who aren't just selling something that everybody's already buying. That in a sense, science is about selling something where there's no market. So you're also creating a marketplace for it. Like, this is a whole new idea. There is no such thing as this. I mean, to sell something like that is not just a normal kind of marketing, right? Like a new drink.
That's true.
Right?
Right.
Not that it's better or worse. It's just a different kind of salesmanship based on real fact. Not hype, but sales for sure, but not hype. And I think that getting that balance right is something that I know, the people who do that well, I think, do the best. But I think underpinning it always has to be this idea of creativity. So my postdoc advisor, for example, I think, his approach was to always value the creative component above everything else. And that's always been more interesting to me.
I won't embarrass you by asking you if you know who Lefty Grove was.
I don't know.
No, okay, or Lefty Gomez. But Lefty Gomez was a all-star pitcher.
I was gonna guess a boxer or a pitcher.
All-star pitcher for the
Yep.
New York Yankees in
Okay.
the 30s and 40s, before you were even a thought in your parents' eyes.
Okay.
However, in addition to being a famous pitcher, he was also famous for many of his quotes. And the one quote I like, and I think it applies to me most, but I'm going to ask you, is he's the one who said, "I'd rather be lucky than good." So how much has
Yeah.
luck played a part in your career?
It's
and
fun.
do you ascribe to that?
Yeah, it's funny. I have a colleague. I didn't know though where that came from, but I have a colleague of mine who I started at UC San Diego with. He's a fantastic, actually one of the guys who came to mind earlier, who always says that. I'd rather be lucky than good. And he's a fantastic chemist. To which, how much I mean, you know, serendipity is the word we use.
Yeah.
And it obviously has a slightly different connotation. And I said that earlier. I mean, I really, that is the most fun part is when something happens in the lab that you did not expect. And it is the rarest event, right? Usually what you want to do doesn't work, and that's the end. And you don't necessarily notice that there's any good result in there, it's just sludge. But when you notice there's something like a diamond in there that you didn't expect, that's the real rarity. And I think you can see this happen throughout history, right? Specifically in science. I think that has played a huge role. I mean, you follow your nose. I think you have to have a strategy. You have to have a plan and a strategy, and then within that, these things happen.
Yeah.
But you've built an environment for it to happen. I think that's also when you're most proud of the people who work with you, because they're the kind of people who recognize it.
So I think it would be, I'd rather be lucky than good, but then the corollary is that chance favors the prepared mind.
Right.
So-
Right. Well, the old thing of
Yes.
you're not going to win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket.
Exactly.
And I think hopefully our odds are better than that. But it is a rare event. I mean, I think you could have a successful career where everything is designed. I mean, one could.
Yeah.
I certainly haven't.
No, I don't know.
And I think most of the time it's a student comes in and goes, how about we do this instead, because none of your ideas have worked. And I've said before, I'm not supposed to have ideas that work. I'm just supposed to have lots of ideas.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe saying it a different way as well.
And we like to think, or people think that everything works linearly. It doesn't. It's ring. It's a Tyndall box.
Yep. And I think really good people in the lab are the ones who do that. It's not that their experiments work more frequently. Yeah.
Now, looking into the future, a little crystal ball of yours, what excites you the most in the near future? I mean, obviously melanin and all this.
Oh, from my own work?
Or from any perspective you want.
Yeah, there's lots of things going on now that I think, I think there's, if it sort of take it as a whole, in terms of the sort of fields we're in chemistry, for example, in material science, we're coming to an era, and I think this is really well explained in the context of the sort of genome project kind of idea, where there's been this, and the sort of the analogy there, not exactly, but there's this sort of collection of information and knowledge about how to make molecules, or in the case of the genome project, what are the genes? And then the next, once we get all that information, we realize that the world is a lot more complicated. Well, we always knew that, but I think we're opening the door up more and more now in this era to the real complexity, at least the real complexity of something like biology, where I think we're able to get in there and say, let's really do the really hard work of getting this exactly right. The thing that relates mostly to us in that context is therapy and developing therapeutics. And this is where single agents or compounds with very specific targets have done okay, but nowhere near well enough. And it is complicated. Immunotherapy is one of these areas. And so I think just on the basic science side, we have the tools and maybe the mathematics, the data analysis capability, and this is in our world, not a big data problem, it's a small data problem. We just can't do enough experiments to know enough It's not that we have a huge amount of data and need to compress it. So we're at this, I think we're entering this era now of being able to maybe more directly address complexity. And that might be hugely naive, and maybe we're 100 years from now. But I do think we need to be there. You know, we need, in a sense, to be studying and not being afraid of that. I think in this sort of, like I mentioned, reductionist view is, well, I can understand everything if I know its components, is just not true. And it's never been true in biology or in environmental science either. But I think in materials and in chemistry, this idea of there being a system that we can develop, sort of through some collective approach of screening and analysis, and maybe it's machine learning, these types of things, or image analysis, and bringing to bear all these tools at once creates, you know, larger and larger multidisciplinary consortia, which you see happening in the US and in Europe and in China certainly. And I think there's a lot of appreciation for that. I think that's, you'd love to live forever to see if this plays out, but the next 100 years will be about really the nitty gritty. And maybe not personalized medicine, let's say, but, you know, binning populations into groups that, for which we can generate more complex and targeted therapeutics. Specifically to what we do, I think that's the most exciting thing. If we could have 1% sort of an involvement in that, I'd be very happy.
The last thing we're going to do is play a little game.
Okay.
Based on the BBC show Desert Island Discs. Are you familiar with that?
A Desert Island what?
Discs.
Discs.
D-I-S-C-S. Discs, as in CD discs.
Yeah. Okay. No, I don't know. Okay.
Well,
What?
this is my adaptation of it, but it's a very interesting. Here's the scenario, and I'm going to ask you 3 things.
Okay.
So you're going to be stranded on a desert island for the rest of your life, and you cannot get off.
Okay.
You are going to be supplied all of the things you need to live: food, electricity, clothing,
Coconuts.
everything that you want there. Now, the original Desert Island Discs asks the person, what 10 albums would you want for the rest of your life? You're not going to get any more than 10, but I don't want to go through 10, we don't have the time. But what 3 pieces of music would you choose to listen to for the rest of your life? That's 1. Number 2, we're going to supply you with the complete works of Shakespeare, and either the Bible or the Koran or whatever religious text you want. What 1 additional book would you choose to take with you?
Okay.
And we're going to allow you 1 item of pleasure, but it cannot be a plane or a boat to get off the island. What 1 luxury item would you take?
Okay. Okay. How many pieces of music? 3?
3. And this doesn't have to be scientific, obviously.
If I did it based on albums,
yeah,
it'd
sure.
definitely be, I'd say it's a tough one between Let It Be and Abbey Road.
Okay.
Any Medeski, Martin and Wood album,
Uh-huh.
because any one of them I could listen to forever probably. The 3rd one, I'd go, I think you need a different, maybe the Stones, like a greatest hits album or something.
Okay.
It's a lamer one, but I think you need that mixed in if you're going to be there forever.
Okay.
Books, was that the next one?
What book?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the first book. I've already read it 15 times. I can read it a bunch more times. It's fantastic. It's about that thing. Luxury item. I'm assuming I'm isolated so that
Yes.
phones wouldn't work.
No.
Because that was the first thing I thought was I'd take my iPhone. I don't know. A luxury item. I think given this scenario, you would want a really, really comfy chair.
Okay. Good enough.
That's what I'm going to go with.
Thanks.